Hi, everyone. This is Max Sims representing MindTrace today. It's great to be here, and I want to introduce you to Dan, the musician. Like 80,000 Americans each year, Dan was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And brain surgery is particularly scary because patients want to make sure they'll be the same person coming out of surgery that they were going into surgery. And so the challenge for the neurosurgeon is really to find the best route to remove as much tumor as possible versus damaging nearby healthy brain tissue. That could lead to cognitive deficits like being unable to walk or talk. And in Dan's case, the surgical team needs to protect his musical ability. But in order to protect it, you have to understand where it is in the brain. And so during our I-Core experience, the NSF National I-Core experience, we learned neurosurgeons are very good at collecting the detailed neuroimaging and behavioral data to protect the person, but they experience significant pain points when it comes to trying to tie all this data together. And so this experience really informed our current solution, where we bring together in 3D, overlaying all the imaging and behavioral data clinicians want when they plan these resection routes. And once the data is aligned, it allows for our patent pending IP to simulate a surgical resection path and ultimately predict the cognitive outcome of that patient all before the first incision. We're positioned between companies that really specialize in neuropsych testing and companies that produce neuronavigation products like BrainLab and Stryker. And we sit really smack dab in between these two worlds. We're currently working on two product lines. The first is called Strong View and allows for neuropsychologists and neurosurgeons to conduct behavioral testing before, during, and after surgery. And the second product is called Strong Map. And this brings together behavioral data from Strong View and pairs it with neuroimaging data. And this is what allows surgeons to simulate a surgical resection path and ultimately predict that patient's cognitive outcome. I mentioned Dan earlier, but it's important to understand that our technology can be equally applied to tumor and epilepsy patients. Taken together, there are 230,000 newly diagnosed epilepsy and tumor patients each year in the United States. And from speaking with key opinion leaders in the field, we believe our technology can make an immediate impact with 20 to 30,000 of these patients. And each one of these patients costs our healthcare system somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000 each year. And so if we can lower the cost of caring for these patients by even 1%, this would result in $42 million in healthcare savings to our healthcare system. We're currently participating in 3 accelerator programs right now as we refine our business model. We've raised $133,000 to date, and the most recent $25K came from the Optum Startup Studio. Optum is a subsidiary of United Healthcare, and so this is really allowing us to understand the relative value we can contribute to payers, hospital systems, and providers. Our founding team is based at CMU, and the foundational academic research was conducted with 150 patients and resulted in 8 peer-reviewed publications. Dan was actually one of these patients, and he ultimately played his saxophone while he was awake at the end of surgery to show that his musical ability was still intact. Thank you.
I guess I'm starting off the questioning. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about business model. I got that you feel like there are about 20 to 30,000 patients per year. That would be your, first market, and that there's a lot of healthcare savings. But can you tell me a little bit about how you're going to charge for the product and how much per patient and what the total addressable market size would be?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What you're going to take away and how also the business model, how you're going to charge them for it.
Yeah, so this is really why we wanted to get into these 3 accelerator programs. Optum is part of United Healthcare, so it really is allowing us to understand what is the incremental value of decreasing OR time by an hour, or decreasing neuro ICU stays by half a day, or decreasing speech and language therapy after the fact. And so we're currently exploring 2 business models. The first is a site license model, where departments of neurosurgery with a key opinion leader writes the business plan in order to attract 1 or 2 new patients each month. And that would be the break even. We're looking at pricing that around 25 to 50K for a site license. And then the other model that we're exploring is on a per patient basis. And a lot of that has to do with whether or not this is going to be reimbursable and with the CPT codes. And so right now, that's why we're in these programs, is really to understand which business model makes the most sense for us.
Thank you.
Hi, Max. So my question is around that slide where you had the competitors.
Sure, right here.
So you said you sit in the middle of these two groups. Can you explain more how you do sit in the middle? Like, what does each group do, and then how are you competing with them in the space? Because it's hard to believe that there's no 3D modeling elsewhere in the space that you're
Sure.
having.
So yeah, so on the left, you have these neuropsych companies. They really do like behavioral testing. They don't touch neuroimaging. They don't touch 3D rendering, but they do touch, this is a cat, this is a dog, picture naming, those kinds of tests. On the other side, you have these neuronavigation companies, and the big three are Stryker, Medtronic, and BrainLab. And they do 3D navigation, but they don't bring in any cognitive predictive element. So it's almost like if you were to pull out a map back in the 1990s and you want to get from A to B, they tell you all the roads you can take. We tell you the implications of taking these different roads on cognitive outcome. And so sometimes it makes sense to take certain roads because the risk of language deficit would be lower than taking other roads. And so that's really the next step that's coming in brain surgery over the next decade. And that's why we're trying to sit right in the middle of these two worlds.
That was a great analogy. So you guys it's safe to say you are the only people in this particular space.
So from what we can gather, we did our international search report. We've done our patent application in December. And from what we can gather, we're the only ones sitting in this space right now. And I think the window is open because of the advances in neuroimaging right now. And this is a window that is going to be open for 2 to 3 more years and slowly closing. But we're ultimately trying to position our IP to be appealing to these big three I mentioned, Stryker, Medtronic, and BrainLab, because we could really fill a niche in their portfolio when it comes to predictive analytics.
I thought I heard 230,000 people being afflicted with tumors and epilepsy each year, but is it 230 or is it 20 to 30,000?
Yeah, so let me, if I can throw this slide back up. So 230,000 patients are diagnosed each year with brain tumors or with epilepsy. Now there's a subsection of tumor and a subsection of epilepsy that ultimately end up having this kind of surgery. And in epilepsy, it's if medication fails. And tumor, generally the tumor has to come out regardless of if it's a glioma or a glioblastoma. And so the type of surgery that we really focus on are these awake brain surgeries. And this is what's done with that 20 to 30,000 patient subset. And so that's really our beachhead. But by kind of dominating that niche, we can then begin to generalize this technology to patients that don't have awake brain surgery. And that would include the majority of brain tumor and epilepsy patients.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
What is your claim that you're taking through a regulatory agency?
Okay, so as a regulatory path, I mean, this is a long road for us. We're ideally, it's anticipated will be a class 3 device. And so really the claims that we're making fall outside of your typical neuronavigation companies. So like BrainLab, Stryker, they do 3D modeling, but the 510K option is not available to us because we bring in this machine learning component that looks at cognitive outcome. And so really what that means for us is that we're going to have to do some pre-submissions. This has been a focus for us. Last week, we were speaking with regulatory specialists to begin understanding how we're going to pursue regulatory path, because that's a key thing for us to de-risk right now. And in the next 2 months, we expect to do our pre-subs, really start dialogue with FDA. And ultimately, I think our goal is to pursue breakthrough device pathway because 510K is not an option. So this is an area that we know we need to get up to speed on, but luckily we're in Optum, we're in VentureWell's Aspire program, and we have access to these regulatory specialists that are now helping us really craft this roadmap.